Thank you, bro. Thank you much. Wow. Like, um, so if you haven't seen Trial 4, um, I urge you all to subscribe to Netflix and watch the docu series Trial 4. Um, and one of the I don't know what adverb or adjective to put on it, but um, when I first came home, I had to ask my brother. I had to I had to ask him, how long do I spend in the shower? Um, and that's because when I was in prison, when I was incarcerated, right? The shower was a very vulnerable time. So so you would think, like, you could think like the shower wasn't a place for you to want to stay at. So you get in and you get out as quickly as possible. And when I was released and I came home, I immediately wanted to transition into what life would be like on the outside. And so I wanted to know, like, what was the normal, quote unquote, what was the normal duration of a shower. And my brother graciously said to me, however long you want. However long you want to stay in the shower, you stay in the shower, right? And I'm not sure if he understood the magnitudes of his words, right? But the magnitudes of his words was parallel to the words of my attorney when she came to see me, and she told me that we had got a new trial, and I became very thankful and appreciative of the work and the service that she had provided, right? But she reminded me immediately, if not sooner. She said, no. She said, you had a role to play in this. Because prior to her being in my case, I solicited her to come on to my case, right? So I became a staunch advocate of what it was that I was experiencing, right? And then when I came home, the people that received me, and I'll go into that further because I didn't have a place to go to, and that's like a whole nother part of this piece. But the people that received me in a space and in a mindset of empowerment, and and led me in my path of freedom to my path of empowerment. So where I was definitely appreciative, but not subjective to the people that were assisting me in my place. And so at 19 years old, um, I was searching for my own identity. Me and my mom, I grew up in a single family, a single parent household, and so my mom was tasked with the job of raising me. Um, and at 19 years old, I don't say I found myself, but at 19 years old, I was wrongfully arrested and then wrongfully convicted of the murder of a Boston police officer, John Mulligan. And 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 with my arrest came came a whole lot. And my attorneys did the best that they could do. And my mom did the best that she could do to, stand by me. But the the weight and the power and the influence and the pressure of the Commonwealth, you know, is she kind of stepped back into a space of of being a safe supporter, right? And these words are important: being a safe supporter, right? Um, and being committed to her son, because when I was found guilty in 1995, I had called home just to check in with my mom and let her know, like, no matter what situation that I found myself in, that I was gonna be okay. And when I called home, my mom told me, she said, "Son, I know that you didn't do this crime, and so I need you to get yourself into that law library and show them that you didn't do this crime." And one of the main things that my mom said to me, that of how she knows that I didn't do this crime, and as I see there's a lot of women on the phone, right? But it isn't about women. As a parent, you know what clothes your child wears. When your child leaves your house in the morning, instinctually, you know what clothes your child wears. And so when the police went out and they sought this witness, right, to identify my photograph out of a photo array, the witness might not identify my photo, like my face, right? And it isn't as if they weren't told who to identify, right? But my mom said she knows that I didn't commit this crime because the clothes that the witness was describing that the assailant was wearing was not clothes that she has ever seen me in. Like, it isn't, we all have fashion, we all have style. You know what you wear, and you know what you don't wear, right? If you typically wear a skirt suit to a business meeting, okay, you wear a skirt suit to the business meeting, right? And so when the witness said, yeah, we seen him and he was wearing this clothing, my mom, and I can't stress that enough, but my mom knew that this person was being untruthful, right? Because my mom knows what clothes that I wear. She knows my fashion, right? If something happened to your child and you reached out to, they ask you to identify your child, right? And if they're not physically identifiable, they say, can you identify their clothes, a tattoo, or anything, right? So there's validity and there's truth and there's solidness in that, right? And my mom said, I know that she was not being truthful because the clothes she said you was wearing, you do not wear those clothes. Okay. And so now, like, let's fast forward. And throughout the investigation, we ended up learning that the police officer that solicited the identification of me, right, was essentially the uncle of Denise, who in which he solicited the identification from. Now, not only was it the uncle, and not only was this not shared with his superiors in the defense, this information wasn't turned over until a year into the investigation. I'm gonna say it again. You had someone that was investigating this homicide who has ties to these supposed identifying witness who did not report this to his superior until a year into the investigation. That means that the homicide happened in 1993. Okay, the first time it was reported and documented in any records, in any files, that there was connection between Officer Acera and the identifying witness, Rosa Sanchez, was a year after the investigation had already started. Okay, and what wasn't shared is that 2 weeks prior to Detective Mulligan's murder, right, that he, along with several other police officers and detectives, robbed a drug dealer at gunpoint for marijuana and thousands of dollars. That also wasn't turned over. So I'll fast forward. I presented my direct appeal. In Massachusetts, when you're convicted of first-degree murder, you are for lack of a better word, you have the privilege of a direct appeal. And that means that you don't have to fight for it, you don't have to ask for it, you're automatically granted. Once the jury says that you're convicted of first-degree murder, you have the automatic constitutional right to an appeal. And so when I sought to present my appeal, still being naive, you know, I presented to the court that, okay, this witness is lying, okay? These cops have been corrupt in all these other cases, and the Commonwealth isn't disclosing the information that I'm asking for. So I can't give you all that you're demanding that I give you, but what I'm telling you is that the Commonwealth has it. They're just not turning it over. I have the burden of proof on appeal, not at trial, on appeal. And I can only fulfill my burden of proof if the agent of the Commonwealth does his or her job, staying in line with the law, and turn over exculpatory evidence. Exculpatory evidence meaning evidence in my favor, evidence that could help me to prove my innocence. I first asked for this stuff in 1994, in September of 1994. I asked for any information or evidence of Detective Mulligan, who's the victim in this case, Detective Brazel, who's an investigating detective, Detective Robinson, also an investigating detective, or Robinson, having been untruthful in any other investigation. And the Commonwealth responded by telling the judge that I was on a fishing expedition, despite the news reports that said there was a shootout in the financial district in the city of Boston between the investigating detectives and another police officer of the Boston Police Department. There was a shootout. They were shooting at each other. And the case against this police officer was dismissed because one of the investigative police officer's testimony did not match up against the civilian testimony and the physical evidence in the case. We asked for this information and they chose not to give it to us. When we speak about the criminal legal system, when we speak about justice, when we speak about police accountability, we have to keep in mind that our criminal legal system is a derivative of slavery. And not only is it a derivative of slavery, right? But it's keeping in mind that post-slavery, right, as the system was being developed, right, because in slavery, we was considered less than human, right? And as the system is being developed, it's being developed from a psychology, right, of a fraction or element of a citizenry being less than human and not deserving of the constitutional protections that existed. We have to keep in mind, right, that as the system developed, we weren't in mind. When I say we, Black and brown people weren't in mind. So when it came time to right to a fair trial, to right to counsel, when it came time to the Fifth Amendment, we didn't have all this stuff until the 14th Amendment, these amendments after the fact that made us human, that made us come into the protection. Please listen to me. That allowed us to come into the protection of the Constitution. The Constitution being the fundamental document that gives us all of our protections. No one in this call can go up anywhere and say anything you want without the Constitution. And Black and brown people didn't have that right when we started out. So when it comes to the criminal legal system, right, it's keeping in mind, and being very mindful that it started when I didn't have a right to a fair trial. I didn't have that right as a Black and brown person. And so when it comes to policing of Black and brown communities, right, all of this stuff matters because it shapes how Black and brown communities are policed, right? It influences what goes on. It influences the interaction. It just so happens that 2 days ago, I went to MCI Norfolk, where my brother last came to see me at. That was the institution I was being held at. And I seen a man walk out of that institution to nothing except his family and the people from the community that we were able to amass to get there to receive him. Why does that matter? Why is that important? Because when you come out of a system, right, that dehumanizes, that devalidates, right, that tells you that you have no value, when you come out of that system, right, there needs to be an immediate reversing, right, of the damage. There has to be an immediate stop of the trauma that's being perpetuated. When I was incarcerated, there's times I had to take cold showers, not by choice, but because there was no hot water. There's times that I couldn't use the commode in the cell that I was sharing, right? That I had to go out and use a porta potty. No water. I couldn't use the porta potty and wash my hands or sanitize. It's pre-COVID. That environment is less than humane. We as a society sentence people to incarceration to make amends for harm that have been done, right? And I'm a staunch advocate, right, that we need to have protections in place, right, to allow for and endorse social order, right? What I'm not in favor of is putting the people into a system that is going to continue to traumatize and perpetuate the harm that causes one to venture outside the bounds of social order. right? And so when we speak about defunding police, when we speak, it isn't about taking away the ability for police to effectively do their job. It isn't that at all. We're speaking about what are the resources, right, to establish institutions of healing, restorative justice, transformative justice, emotional literacy. There's all this stuff that goes into people who act outside of the bounds of social order. We're not talking about the systemic racism. We're talking about trauma at this point. Systemic racism is one issue, right? But if we want to correct delinquency and I forget the other words, but people that act out deviancy, right? If we want to address deviancy, we have to begin to address the healing of the people. When I came home in 2015, and this is the part that I was going to get to prior. On my way home, my family was they were trying to find me a place to stay. They were trying to find me a room in a rooming house. I was 19 years old when I was arrested and wrongfully convicted. So when we started a room in a rooming house, right? I didn't have no credit. 19 years old. I didn't have any credit. I hadn't had a job. So when they're trying to find me housing now, after being wrongfully convicted, it's like, okay, well, do you have any credit history? Do you have any jobs? Like, no, sorry, he has none of that. And we're trying to do things with me above ground to establish me. No, but he has none of that. Sorry, he can't come here. We need this, we need that. Long story short, right? There was a conversation between my brother and his family, my brother, his wife, my niece, my nephew. And they said, well, listen, we're not going to continue to try to seek housing for him. We're not going to do this. We're not going to jump through hoops, right? We're going to let him come home in his power. Productivity over whining equals results. We're going to let him come home in his power. Not only are we going to let him come home in his power, my wife and I, we're going to give our room to him, right? And we're going to receive him into the space. I came home and was received in that space. It was a loving space, an appreciative space, all of that, right? But what it caused is for me to connect with other exonerees, an exoneree by the name of Victor Rosario and Ray Champagne. Ray Champagne is no longer with us. He passed away tragically last summer in a motorcycle accident. But we began to have conversations and we realized that I had support when I came home. I didn't have the world, but I had some support. Victor Rosario had some support. And he didn't have the world, but he had some support. And Ray Champagne, he came home and he had some support as well. Not the world, but support. And we said to ourselves, well, wow, we're still struggling. We're still struggling. And it wasn't necessarily a material struggle. My brother made sure I ate every morning, every afternoon, and every night. I never went to bed hungry. And I woke up full. Bro, and I love you for that. The food tastes different. Like there's so much value. Like we don't have a lot of time, but I can come back and unpack more, right? There was an internal struggle. There was an internal tapestry that we all could relate to. I remember my family, including my brother, trying to do an intervention for me. They felt I was too rough around the edges. To me, it was normal. I had been in prison with a bunch of men who society said was the worst of the worst. And I'm not okay with being preyed on. I'm not okay with being victimized. I don't think anybody in the space is okay with being preyed on or victimized, right? We walked into a space to where I was struggling, Victor Rosario was struggling, and Ray Champagne was struggling. And we said, if we have the support that we have, imagine those who do not have the support that we have, but are coming home with the struggles that we have. And I kind of feel as though it's like there needs to be a connection to kind of really appreciate what it is that I'm saying. I don't know how many parents are on this call, but imagine hearing your child crying of hunger and not being able to feed your child. Imagine your child in a soiled diaper. In a soiled diaper. And you needing small diapers to put a fresh diaper on your child. Imagine having hunger pains in your stomach. We've all been hungry, I would imagine. We've all been hungry. Imagine having a hunger pain in your stomach that just won't go away. If we do not speak up against injustice, that's not curing a hunger pain. That's not changing the soiled diaper. If we're not speaking up against what's wrong, if we're not being bold and unapologetic, if we're shrinking in the face of dominant culture, if we're not being bold and unapologetic about what the struggle is and what the mission is and what our fight is and what's going on, if we're not being bold about our morality and what's right, we're essentially giving a pass to what exists now. We're essentially giving a pass to the status quo. And what I say is that we can no longer give a pass to the status quo. It doesn't matter of political affiliation. None of that stuff matters. We're living in a time where it's about your moral compass and morality. It's about right and wrong. And history is going to decide. One thing that I've heard, right, that separates all of that is this: do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And if you're in injustice, if you're in inequity, if you're on the peripherals of the dominant culture, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And if you're in, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. All we have is one another. And if we don't have one another, it's not going to get any better. It's just going to continue to get worse. How do I know? And I end with this. I say that The exoneree community is the closest community to slavery that you will ever get. Why do I say that? The 13th Amendment says that slavery is abolished, except if one is duly convicted. When you go to trial and the jury says guilty, it doesn't matter if they're right or they're wrong, you become duly convicted. At one point, I was duly convicted because the jury said that I was guilty, and I had to fight to prove my innocence. Okay? I can't go from being duly convicted to prove my innocence. Like it's an enigma. I trust that you get the point that I'm making. We're not free until we're all free. And I would love to come back. I wanted to come back in person and expound on this further. And I trust that you connect with my brother to make this happen if it's a desire. But you know, if you have any questions, you know, feel free to ask.
Thank you, bro. I love you beyond words, as you know. And you just made me choke up all over again. But yeah, let us, thank you, Sean. Thank you for having us. You can unmute yourself, take yourselves off mute, and just give Sean a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you all.
And because of time, we're gonna go right into Q&A. We're gonna go right into Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, how many can we take, James? Could we take about 3 questions?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
We can take about 3-4 questions, if you have them.
Hey, Sean, thank you so much for sharing your story. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
We'll be here tomorrow. I can figure out how to use it. I was trying to use it still.
So I was just wondering, are there some things that the exoneree community in New England, how we can support more of the efforts, like either now or, you know, in the next year? Are there things on the top of your mind that, you know, would help?
Thank you so much for your question. And it might sound cliche-ish, but I can't stress enough, right? Please pay attention to the district attorney's race. Please pay attention to the district attorney's race. That race is so important, right? Because so we all heard of Rachel Rollins, right? And people love her or they hate her, right? Of course I love her. She had a lot to do with it. However, right? There's people who I believe are innocent that are still incarcerated, and they still call me. And I remember there's a guy at home now. His name is Stephen Pena. And when he was incarcerated while she was still the district attorney, and I said to him, I said, brother, you have to understand, right? She still has a job to do. It isn't about just you. It's whether or not what happened to you, right, should not have happened. Whether it was wrong, whether it was outside of the bounds of the law, right? My point is, right, pay attention to the district attorney's race, because a lot of these district attorneys, they connect with law enforcement and they push one initiative and that's it. And that is what's eroding this criminal legal system. You gotta remember, you have to remember, right? It's like we're coming back as a country. As a country. I have grandparents, you have grandparents, we all have grandparents, and they have parents. We're coming back as a country, right? With a very dark history, right? It takes us in this space now to say, okay, I'm not co-signing that history, right? And I'm correcting this. And so when it comes to voting, we have to involve ourselves into this system in order to correct it. We can't stay on the sideline and say, well, the system's not serving me and I don't want to participate in it. No, that's contributing to the problem. We have to get in and allow our voice to be heard. I've said, I've been home, wounded but not broken. And we might be wounded, but we're not broken. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Sean. Are there any other questions?
I've got a quick one that, first of all, it is so wonderful to have you here and to hear you tell this story. I would love for you to come back and do an in-person discussion with us. There's so much we could learn. I saw and I've read about the Norwegian prison system. And I was wondering if that's more of what our system needs to be like, and whether the reason theirs is so excellent at helping people recover from what's gone on in their life, that they didn't have the slavery linkage to it. And so
thank you for your question. And as a disclaimer, I don't know too much about the New England system, right? But I've heard some of it, right? And I've heard that it's a good system, right? That I've heard that the crime rate is so low. Like everything is low. Yeah. Everything is lower than us here in the States, right? So my point to that is it could certainly be a model for us to look at.
Yeah.
Right? Slavery here, the States, it's trauma. It's trauma. It's generational trauma. It's racial trauma. And we, you and I, us on this phone, we have the ability to address that trauma. Yeah. Us. We have the ability to address that trauma, right? And to amplify, right, the addressing of that trauma. So I graduated high school. I did not go to college, right? I got my paralegal certificate when I was in prison because I had to learn like what happened to me and how it happened and so on and so forth, right? I ended up learning how laws are made. Yeah. The way that laws are made is there are people like you and I in this call who become dissatisfied and put pressure on our legislators, right? And our legislators now become empowered by us to push what we want. Rather than saying, well, okay, I'm going to tell you what I want to do. No. What happened is now we tend to look at people in power as the ones that have the power when we have the power. And we have to push and advocate and demand what it is that we want. And if we want a system of healing, then we will get a system of healing. So long as it's in our heart to get a system of healing. And I believe that times are changing here out in the world now, where people are seeing that our criminal legal system just continues to perpetuate harm and hurt, right? And if you perpetuate trauma and hurt, what's going to come back is harm and hurt. I believe as a society, we want a criminal legal system that corrects and protects. And the protection is in the correction. So if you heal the trauma, you correct the trauma, you heal the person, and then now you have a safer, better society. Can I prove it? No, because we've had a carceral system since the advent of our country. Let's rethink it, reimagine.
Thanks, bro. Can I just say, as a family member who's gone through this, my brother was incarcerated for 22 years. When he came home, my brother wanted to know what was his curfew at 40 years old. What was his curfew at nighttime? There's nothing good or excellent about prison. Absolutely nothing. It's an oxymoron to the fullest extent.
And bro, if you can coordinate me coming back, I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I would love to come back and connect the person.
Absolutely. We'll discuss it internally. Absolutely. All right, we have time. I'm sorry.
I'll volunteer to help, Andre. This is Karen Bishop.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. We have time for one more question. And Curtis, I did see you said you had a comment and it's going to be brief. It seems like we don't have a question. So you got a minute, Curtis, go.
Yes, thank you. Again, I just wanted to say, Sean, thank you. I appreciate your resolve. Ever since we met when you first came out at Malcolm X Park, you've been a motivation for me to continue to do a lot of the work that I've done in the city of Boston. You're my hero, brother. I love you. You're the reason why,
bro. You're my hero, bro.
you're the reason why I went into criminal justice, and I'm gonna continue to do everything that I can. Every time I hear your story, it's just continued motivation, and I'm gonna just land it there. I love you, brother. I love you, and we're gonna continue to do this. I'm not gonna say, you know how I feel about those people that did these things to you, and I'm gonna just leave it there. I love you, though. I love you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Doesn't look like we have any more questions, any more reactions, comments. Feel free, put in the chat. But thank you so much, Sean. Thank you for just being vulnerable and sharing your story with us once again. I'm sure it's not easy. And so just incredibly grateful for your vulnerability and your storytelling. We're really grateful to be here with you. So, Sean, you want to go ahead? Go ahead, you want to say something.
Yeah, no, I just see Maddie's hand.
Oh, you're on mute, Sean.
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just see Maddie's hand. I don't know if Maddie had a question for me, if that was for you.
All right, go for it, Maddie. Last question.
Oh, thank you. First, I want to thank you so much, Sean, for sharing your impassioned, for your impassioned strength to share this story with us, and to also receive so much love in this space. It's really beautiful to see, and I hope that feels good for you too. I'm in BC, Canada, so I'm on the other side of the continent than Boston. And I'm curious if you have anything to share about helping people to overcome their apathy and their general malaise and anxiety about getting involved in political spaces. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Canadian political landscape, but it's extremely apathetic and very fragile emotionally. I personally work in politics, and I believe in abolition and just land back and all the things that we aren't yet doing or don't have the will to do. And our media landscape is like a very quiet, and it's not often, we don't have spaces like this. Our population is not as dense. Our media is very corrupt. So I'm just curious if there's anything you have to share, any words of wisdom or thoughts on how to help people get involved here.
Thank you. And I'll close out with this. And I want to say that I've experienced all of that and more what you have described, right? The whole apathy, the apathetic, the quietness, like all of that, right? This is for me, right? I trusted into a system that failed me, right? I trusted in the people that failed me, like just nothing didn't work, right? So I first and foremost had to rely on myself, and then I had to develop a relationship with a power greater than myself. So whether you call it God, Jesus, Allah, Jehovah, it doesn't matter. Whether you call it the universe, whether you call it she, he, it doesn't matter, right? But there's a universal power that exists. I know because I'm a beneficiary of that universal power, right? When we understand, right, that our system will only work, our system will only work if we demand that it work, right? We will know that there is no space for apathy, because it's either it works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, who isn't it working for, right? My point is this, we have to wrap up, right? My point is this, is no matter what energetic field, no matter what defeatism, no matter what apathy, no matter what kind of pushback, like we're living in a time, right, where it's either justice or injustice. It's either equity or inequity. Like we're no longer living in a time where it's gray, right? It's like we've been confronted with what it is in our time, and it's where do we stand at now? Are we gonna kick the can down the road and pass it on, or are we gonna step up and say no? No, I don't care if you're a Democrat, I don't care if you're a Republican, I don't care if you're independent. What I care about is my moral compass and me being aligned with my moral compass. And if you're aligned with my moral compass, then we can have a conversation. But if you're not aligned with my moral compass, I don't care what you look like, how you sound. I don't care about any of that. Because at the end of the day, judgment is going to be cast by the power that we consider higher power.
In other words.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm pulling brother rank. I'm pulling big little brother rank and tell you, shut up now.
I will.
I love you, bro. Unfortunately, obviously, we're going to bring you back, but we do have another session that we have to get to. We're going to bring Sean back. We just got to figure it out internally. I love you, bro. Thank you so much.
I love you too. Call me.
I will.
All right. Thank you all. I look forward to coming back.
Thank you, Sean.
Because he was actually sitting.
Wow. Damn, want to say bye to Sean and give him more love, but at the same time, but Yeah, that was so great. Thank you all for the questions, for the engagement. Super grateful for y'all's just attendance today.